Both of you playing dead, get up, Aaron commanded, addressing the generals who were attempting to feign death, despite being wounded only in non-critical areas such as their hands and other parts of their bodies. If you don't wake up by the count of 3, I'm going to kill you for real, Aaron threatened, his voice carrying a sense of discontent. He began the countdown, 1, 2. However, before he could reach the count of 3, the generals abruptly rose from their positions where they had been pretending to be lifeless, instantly snapping back to alertness. Since you tried to deceive me, each of you will suffer the punishment of a broken bone, Aaron declared, causing John, Walter, Nathan, Ethan, and Christopher to freeze in their places. John and Walter stood motionless, their disbelief evident on their faces, as they had never witnessed this sadistic side of Aaron before. Up until this point, they had only experienced his more benevolent nature. While they knew Aaron was capable of causing significant harm, they hadn't anticipated his brutality to this extent. As for the generals, Nathan silently thanked his lucky stars that he hadn't attempted to play dead, while the others trembled with fear at the prospect of the impending pain. Aaron intentionally utilized this moment as a form of psychological torture, fully aware that the anticipation of pain can often be more agonizing than the pain itself. He understood that the fear and anxiety one experiences while awaiting a known painful event can be far more distressing than the actual physical suffering. A few minutes later, "Sir, we have finished," John reported to Aaron, that all the injured soldiers were collected at his specified location. "All right, good, you two, come here," Aaron said, gesturing for the 2 immobilized generals to approach him. He intended to fulfill his promise by breaking their bones before healing them. The 2 generals approached hesitantly, their steps slow and filled with prayers of hope that Aaron might have a change of heart before they reached him. Aaron maintained silence, saying nothing as the 2 generals reached him. "Let's get this over with," Aaron said, gripping their arms firmly. He focused his strength, exerting pressure with his hands until a distinct snapping sound filled the air. Only Aaron and John, with their enhanced senses, could hear the audible snap, as the generals had already begun screaming in agony a few seconds earlier. "All right, take a seat. We have something important to discuss," Aaron instructed, pointing towards the chairs for them to sit. He intended to commence the conversation about his proposition. "You, too, take a seat," Aaron turned to Nathan, who had been attempting to blend into the background while his fellow generals endured the pain of their bones being broken. Nathan hurriedly walked, trying to reach the chair as fast as possible, and took a seat near his fellow generals. "I will heal you all shortly, but before that, I need each of you to sign a contract," Aaron stated, making it clear that he had no intention of explaining the contract's contents to them directly. He expected that they would read and comprehend its terms once he had departed. "If anyone has any objections, now is the time to raise your hand," he added, leaving the opportunity for dissent or concerns to be voiced so that he can deal with them before they cause trouble later. Although Aaron had given them the opportunity to raise their hands if they had any questions or objections, not a single general dared to do so. The foremost thought in their minds was Aaron's assurance of healing. In this moment, they held complete faith in Aaron's capabilities, as they had some time to comprehend the extraordinary events of the past hour. From his sudden appearance, effortlessly subduing their soldiers, to his raw strength demonstrated by breaking their bones, they either genuinely believed or desperately hoped that he possessed the power to heal them. "Since there are no questions, let's proceed to sign the contract as quickly as possible," Aaron stated, while he presented the generals with contracts the size of small books, each containing nearly 400 pages. The contract encompassed every aspect of what Aaron required from the generals, outlining both their obligations and restrictions. Crafted by Nova, it had been meticulously designed to close any potential loopholes that might inadvertently expose Aaron or his plans. Every detail had been addressed to ensure that the generals would comply without compromise. "Sign them now, you can read them later," Aaron commanded, observing the generals who attempted to read through the contracts to understand their contents. His watchful gaze prompted the generals to swiftly flip to the final pages of the contract, where they discovered their designated spots for signing alongside Aaron's already affixed signature. Without wasting any time, the generals quickly signed their names, their minds preoccupied with the belief that whatever the contract entailed, it could not be worse than enduring the excruciating pain of having their bones broken while feeling utterly powerless. As soon as they finished signing their signatures, witnessed only by Aaron, the contracts emitted a radiant golden glow. Within moments, both Aaron and the generals were enveloped in a shimmering golden light that permeated their bodies. A sensation akin to a knot being tightly tied within their beings briefly surged through them, though only Aaron possessed the sensitivity to perceive it. For the others, it was merely a fleeting discomfort, triggered by their existing wounds. Good, Aaron acknowledged, retrieving the contracts from the generals without any intention of leaving them with physical copies with his signatures. I have sent the digital version of the contract to your phones and computers. Once our discussions are over, you can start reading them, he explained, carefully placing the contracts back into the bag from which they had emerged. Now, let's begin the healing process, Aaron announced, proceeding to activate a large number of healing runes on each soldier, who lay down awaiting treatment. The number of runes applied to each soldier varied according to the severity of their injuries. As the runes took effect and visible signs of healing manifested, Aaron shifted his attention to the generals. Though their injuries were comparatively minor in comparison to the soldiers, he still applied a smaller number of healing runes on their bodies to facilitate their recovery. 3 hours later, both the soldiers and the generals were astounded by what their eyes beheld. Every trace of their wounds had vanished, leaving no lingering pain behind. The only remnants of their previous injuries were the residual bloodstains, traces of urine, or the torn remnants of their clothing. I trust that you possess the intelligence not to talk about what had happened here, Aaron asked the now healed soldiers, who were seated on the ground. Their heads nodded in agreement with a sense of urgency, as if their lives depended on it. Very well. You may leave, Aaron instructed, prompting the soldiers to hastily leave the room as if fleeing from a monstrous presence. I will give each of you a period of 2 days to thoroughly read and comprehend the contract before you initiate contact with him, Aaron stated, extending his hand to point at Walter as he addressed the generals. His name is Walter, and he will be responsible for facilitating communication between myself and all of you. Is that clear? Yes, the generals responded in unison. As for him, his name is John, and his orders carry the same weight as my own. So, whatever he commands you, it is to be treated as if it were coming directly from me. Is that clear? Yes, they answered once more, nodding their heads in unison, their eyes locked onto John and Walter, their faces imprinted in their memories, afraid of letting even the smallest detail slip away. And with that, my job here is done. I'll see you in 2 days. Let's go, Aaron said, rising from his seat. The generals promptly stood up, and John and Walter followed him towards the door. Before reaching the door, the three vanished in the same mysterious manner they had arrived, leaving the generals behind in shock, frozen for the 4th time that day. After they departed the building without drawing any attention, John took the opportunity during their ride back home to turn to Aaron and address him with a respectful tone, saying, "Sir, may I ask you a question?" "Go ahead," Aaron said, shifting his attention towards John. "What are your intentions for them now that they have signed the contracts?" John inquired, as he could at least speculate on the contents of the contracts. He was aware that whatever provisions were stated in the contracts were binding, as Aaron had thoroughly explained how the contracts given by him worked in the documents given to him on the day Ares was established. "After we return to the hotel, I will provide you with a document containing the comprehensive details of my intended utilization of the Eden's army and instructions on how you can effectively employ them for your upcoming missions. In essence, we now possess complete control over the Eden's army through the generals." Aaron gave John a short answer and promised to provide him with a dossier containing all the necessary information regarding his strategic plans for utilizing Eden's army. Since they all are in the same field of work and as a part of his strategy to reduce his workload and rely on trusted individuals, Aaron intended to delegate the responsibility of utilizing the generals to John. "Understood," John replied, and he remained quiet for the rest of the journey, deferring his curiosity until he received the document that held all the answers he sought. The generals, now left alone after enduring a series of unimaginable events within a few hours, sat in silence. They were still processing the astonishing turn of events and the speed they took place. Half an hour had passed since Aaron and his group departed, and during that time, not a word was exchanged between the generals. The only remnants that served as a constant reminder that their recent experience was not a dream were their tattered clothes and the broken items scattered around the room. I'm going to my office to thoroughly examine the contract. It's important for us to understand their contents in order to avoid any inadvertent violations, preventing a repeat of what we just experienced. Given his ability to swiftly heal us, any potential punishment from him would likely be more severe and could potentially last for hours, without the concern of us succumbing to blood loss or serious injuries, Nathan declared as he rose from his chair. We can't hide either, considering his ability to appear and disappear without a trace, Ethan added, his voice tinged with unease. He shuddered slightly at the memory, realizing the futility of attempting to evade someone with such enigmatic powers. Without wasting any time, all the generals rose from their seats and made their way back to their respective temporary offices within the building to diligently study and comprehend the contract in its entirety. The urgency to understand the document outweighed any lingering thoughts about the interrupted meeting and the topic they were discussing before Aaron abruptly ended it with his unexpected appearance. None of them had any intention of leaving their offices before they finished the task. As a wise man once said, your problem only seems significant until a bigger problem comes knocking at your door. Have a good day, sir. Walter and John bid farewell to Aaron as they arrived at the hotel and stepped out of the car. You too, Aaron replied. Then, he directed his attention to John and assured him, I will send you the file shortly. With that, Aaron turned around and made his way to the elevator, heading back to his room. Upon entering his room, Aaron collected the stack of freshly printed papers from the printer. Summon the nearest Ares member to my room, Aaron instructed Nova. I need them to deliver the folder to John. He is on his way, Nova reported back shortly, informing him that the called Ares member was already on his way. But wouldn't it be more efficient to call John directly yourself? Nova questioned, voicing her curiously as Aaron patiently waited for the summoned soldier to arrive. While it's true that I could do that, it's important to maintain respect for his position in order to prevent any potential disrespect from other Ares members, Aaron explained, providing his reasoning behind his choice. Nova expressed her disagreement with Aaron's explanation, stating, I don't believe they would disrespect him, regardless of how you treat him. Unless you explicitly order them to do so, they will not show disrespect to someone you have chosen and placed in that position. Disrespecting John would ultimately be seen as disrespecting you, as you have deemed him qualified and entrusted him with the role. It's not just about them, Nova. I also need to acclimate myself to this approach before the new members from the army join us. This way, I can avoid inadvertently treating John as a subordinate of lower rank, establishing a precedent early on rather than later. Upon hearing Aaron's reasoning, Nova eventually agreed, her silence serving as confirmation of her acceptance. Knock knock. Hearing the knock, Aaron rose from the bed where he had been sitting with the folder and made his way to the door, and opened it. Good afternoon, sir, the soldier greeted respectfully, saluting Aaron as he stood at the door. Good afternoon. Aaron reciprocated the greeting and handed the soldier the folder he had been holding. Deliver this to John, he instructed the soldier. Yes, sir. Have a good day, the man answered as he received the folder with his hands and bid Aaron farewell before he started his walk toward John's room. Did anything important happen while I was away? Aaron asked Nova as he closed the door and made his way back into the room. None, sir, Nova responded. Good. How do you feel after having to act so serious for the first time? Nova asked in a teasing manner but still curious about his experience. Although it was challenging to maintain the facade for hours, it did serve its intended purpose, Aaron replied with a smile. That's true, Nova replied, her smile widening as she replayed the audio of Aaron's act during the meeting. Now, the only thing left is to meet with the revolutionary leaders who are causing trouble and ensure that they also sign the contracts, which will make dealing with them easier, he said as he laid down on the bed and put on the virtual helmet logging in the universal simulation. Ah, God, fuck, shit. The three generals expressed similar sentiments, even though they were in separate rooms reading the contracts. Despite their expectations for the contract's inclusion of unfavorable clauses that required them to engage in activities they did not approve of, they soon discovered that their level of expectations fell short of what they were actually confronted with. Christopher wasted no time. He swiftly grabbed his landline phone and dialed the numbers of the other two generals to discuss the contracts. Have you finished reading the contract? He asked abruptly, without offering any greetings or engaging in small talk, as soon as they answered the call. I just finished reading it, Nathan replied. Me too, Ethan responded last. But I'm curious about something. How will he know if we've violated any of the clauses? Ethan asked. I'm curious too. It seems some of the clauses would be impossible for him to detect if we've violated them, Christopher chimed in, concurring with Ethan's observation. He's not foolish enough to include these clauses without having the means to detect our violations and enforce the consequences, Nathan responded, his voice filled with a tinge of apprehension. Remember, this man appeared out of nowhere, withstood bullets, effortlessly incapacitated us using his hands only, and healed our wounds in minutes. Do you really believe he couldn't dispatch people to monitor us invisibly, just as they did today? What makes you think he isn't monitoring us right now? Nathan turned his head, scanning the room for any signs of abnormality. His abilities don't appear to be limited to the physical realm alone but also extend into the digital world. How on earth did he manage to upload files onto our computers and phones without us even providing him with our contact information? Christopher pondered, expressing his bewilderment. Furthermore, the file doesn't contain a sender's address. It's as if the file materialized out of thin air. This suggests that he might even be eavesdropping on our communications at this very moment. Shit, they all said simultaneously, their voices filled with alarm, as they quickly turned to look behind them, half expecting someone to materialize out of thin air and strangle them. They came to the sobering realization that the once cherished sense of security they felt when alone had been entirely compromised. At any given moment, someone could be invisibly present in the same room watching them. We can't escape him anywhere, they silently contemplated, refraining from voicing their thoughts aloud, fearful of the consequences. I believe we don't need to worry about him taking action against us when we discuss him amongst ourselves, Ethan cautiously shared, pausing briefly to reflect on the previous encounters. During our initial meeting, he retaliated when one of us pressed the button and called for the security team. The second time, he inflicted harm upon us when we attempted to feign death, resulting in our broken hands. His actions were always in response to our own actions, never exceeding that boundary. Therefore, as long as we abide by the clauses of the contract, I don't think he will pose a direct threat to us. Ethan's analysis, though speculative, offered a glimmer of reassurance amidst their growing unease. That's just an assumption, and I truly hope it's correct, Christopher interjected, his voice tinged with a mixture of anxiety and desperation. Because if he turns out to be an irrational individual, then we're in serious trouble. Christopher's hope hinged on Ethan's assumption, as they had lost all semblance of control the moment that enigmatic man entered the room during their meeting. I hope so too, Ethan replied. I wonder how he intends to utilize us, Nathan pondered aloud. Could he be plotting to employ the military for a coup d'etat, copyright tat, or some other purpose? Nathan's question hung in the air. It's possible that he intends to utilize us for drug or weapons trafficking, but considering his ability to appear and disappear at will, he doesn't really need us for that, Ethan responded. If that's his plan, I must admit, I'll take pleasure in executing it. Adolf has squeezed us far too tightly, Christopher said with a smile on his face. But we're well aware that it will be challenging to confront Adolf's private forces, given their heavily armed nature, Christopher added, acknowledging the formidable obstacle they would have to face if that was really Aaron's plan. There's no need to strain our minds pondering over it. He specifically instructed us to contact him in 2 days. So, let's wait for further instruction on that day, Nathan suggested. I agree. I'm going to read the contract a few more times, said Nathan. Me too, added Ethan. So, who will be leading the parade? Christopher asked but received no answers, because the moment they heard the question, they ended the call. A week later, Aaron strolled alone, making his way into the hotel, his steps purposeful as he approached the reception area. He carried a bag in his hand, having entrusted his car in the hands of the hotel's valet for him to go and park the car. Welcome, Mr. Aaron, Alexander exclaimed, rising from the comfortable chairs in the hotel lobby. He had been patiently waiting for Aaron's arrival, to accompany him to the meeting room they had scheduled. Oh, Alexander, Aaron replied warmly, extending his hand for a handshake. How have you been? Alexander asked, his tone filled with genuine interest. Quite well, although your regional leaders have been the only ones causing some mischief, Aaron responded in a playful manner. Over time, their frequent calls had brought them closer, fostering a lighthearted banter between them. "I apologize for that," Alexander replied, a hint of embarrassment creeping into his voice. Although he knew Aaron was merely teasing him, he couldn't help but feel a tad self-conscious. "Don't worry, after today, everything will be resolved," Aaron assured, lightly tapping Alexander's hand in a reassuring manner. "Let's head to the meeting room," Alexander suggested, taking the lead as he and Aaron began walking towards the elevator. "But shouldn't they be joining us as well? Where are they?" Aaron inquired, realizing that Alexander was alone. "They are already waiting in the meeting room," Alexander explained. "Don't worry about it," Aaron reassured, noticing that their conversations often seemed to end with Alexander appearing a bit disheartened. As they stepped into the elevator and it began raising, Alexander initiated small talk, filling the brief ride with casual conversation while they waited for their arrival at the floor where the conference room was located. Welcome," they promptly stood up as Aaron entered the room alongside Alexander, displaying a gesture of respect, albeit without genuine sentiment behind it. Alexander guided Aaron to his chair, before taking his own seat as the meeting was about to commence. "So, Mr. Aaron, before we delve into the next topic, could you please introduce yourself? The upcoming discussion heavily relies on our understanding of your background," Adam stated as soon as the meeting commenced. A smile played across Aaron's face as he responded, "Before I address any of your inquiries, I kindly request that each of you sign a non-disclosure agreement, NDA. Without the signed agreement, I won't be able to answer your questions." He retrieved a stack of contracts from his bag and placed them on the table, inviting them to review and sign the documents. Ace took hold of the stack of contracts and proceeded to distribute them among the attendees in the room. Each person began reading through the contents of the NDA contracts thoroughly. One by one, they began signing the contracts as they noticed that everything was in order and the clauses were standard for an NDA. Additionally, they reasoned that they could easily break the contract whenever they deemed necessary, considering the lack of enforcement. As they signed the contracts, as usual, Aaron felt the same sensation of a knot being tied down. However, his heightened sensitivity allowed him to discern that the weight of the knot on his soul has slightly increased, but he considered it as a mistake on his part and decided to postpone further contemplation on it when the meeting was over. When everyone completed signing their contracts, without wasting any time, he began introducing himself. "As most of you already know, my name is Aaron Michael. As for my occupation, I am the owner of Gaia Technology. That's all there is to it. I don't believe any further details about me are necessary." "How old are you?" Ace inquired, curious about Aaron's age, considering he still appeared to be in his 20s. "I'm in my 20s, and that's all I'll disclose," Aaron responded, deciding not to divulge his actual age. He sensed that Ace intended to exploit his age as a means to undermine him. "That's perfectly fine," Oscar interjected, noticing Ace's intention to pry for Aaron's full age. "So, Mr. Aaron, based on Sir Alexander's explanations, he mentioned that your assistance is contingent upon the condition that once we successfully assume control of the country, you want us to rewrite the Constitution and the abolition of the military and its institutions. Is this information accurate?" Adam inquired. "Yes," Aaron replied succinctly with a single word. "Could you please explain the reason behind your proposal?" Adam asked. "I intend for my private forces to assume their role and function as the country's military," Aaron explained. "But why do you prefer it to be that way? Is it primarily a matter of financial gain? If so, we can discuss compensating you after the coup." Adam pressed further, wanting to understand Aaron's motivation behind wanting to replace the existing military. "When it comes to money, I possess wealth exceeding your country's GDP, so it's not about financial gain," Aaron clarified. "The reason behind my proposal is to establish a legal framework that enables me to expand my forces without external interference. This way, I can safeguard the things I value without relying on the protection of others." "Then why Eden? There are numerous unstable countries in the world that you could have chosen," Ace interjected, seeking further clarification. Among the numerous candidates initially considered, only 2 countries, Eden and Isperia, remained in the selection process, Aaron explained. The reason for choosing these 2 countries is their geographical isolation. Being situated in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, they are mutually exclusive, with no immediate neighboring countries other than themselves. This unique circumstance makes them the perfect locations for establishing my forces. The geographical distance between Eden and other countries allows me to expand my forces to a scale comparable to the world's largest militaries without provoking tensions with any nation, except for Isperia. As for why I chose Eden over Isperia, it primarily relates to the size factor. Eden's landmass is nearly equivalent to that of Australia, providing ample space to justify the desired expansion of my forces. Aaron explained without hiding anything, as he was sure that no one would like anything he said in the room. Okay, since you will be assuming control over the military and its institutions, who will we be paying for their services? Inquired another member of the meeting, who had remained silent until now. You will only be responsible for paying the salaries of the forces and providing the necessary land for the military. As for weapons procurement, research and development, training, and all other expenses, they will be covered by me. So, you don't have to worry about those aspects. You will have a world-class military while operating within the budget of an underdeveloped country, Aaron explained. He was confident that despite shouldering the majority of the expenses, the overall cost would be extremely low due to him planning to use the universal simulation. As Aaron's response reached their ears, a collective gasp of astonishment spread throughout the room. Even Alexander, who had been closely working with Aaron, found himself taken aback, unaware of Aaron's plan to cover all the additional expenses. Any more questions? Aaron asked, noticing the silence that had fallen upon the room. Ace, with a noticeable change in his demeanor, spoke up. I have a question regarding the military. Your plan, as shared with us, did not address how you intend to handle the current military. Could you please provide some insights? I have already held a meeting with the generals last week and addressed that particular concern, Aaron replied confidently, eliciting another wave of surprise from the attendees. They have agreed to assist us in the coup d'etat copyright tat, and once the constitutional change takes place, they will be integrated into my forces after the disbandment of their previous institutions. Curiosity piqued, Adam interjected, may I ask what you did to persuade them to agree to such a deal? That's a business secret, Aaron replied with a smile on his face, maintaining an air of mystery around his tactics. You mentioned that you will be undertaking the research, but could you please clarify what specific areas or subjects the research will cover? One of the attendees inquired, seeking further details. After a brief pause, Aaron began his response. The research will encompass a wide range of areas essential to the military's requirements. This includes weapons research and development, as well as addressing all other aspects necessary for a fully functional military force. Given that we will be operating as a quasi-mercenary group masquerading as an army, it is anticipated that many countries will be reluctant to sell us their weapons. Therefore, we need to establish our own research department to ensure we have the necessary capabilities. That's true, Ace agreed with Aaron's explanation. He was confident that they would need to spend a few more months waiting for other countries to acknowledge the new country, followed by them forming diplomatic relationships, which would be followed by the lifting of sanctions imposed on the country. The other members in the room immediately started asking the questions they had in mind or requested further clarification on the answers Aaron had provided. Throughout the entire discussion, Aaron diligently responded to each question, providing the necessary information without divulging anything beyond what was needed. Aaron opted for this approach to ensure that his upcoming plans could proceed without any hindrance or delays caused by the removal of the individuals in the room. He wanted to avoid any adjustments to his plan and desired to move forward with the next steps as soon as possible. Once the meeting concluded and they found themselves alone in the room, Alexander asked, "Are you absolutely certain that no one would be willing to exchange information with Adolf in exchange for financial gain?" Aaron posed the question, "Do you genuinely believe the greedy Adolf would be willing to offer monetary compensation to anyone solely for acquiring information?" After giving it some thought, Alexander responded, "I highly doubt it. He would likely make false promises of payment, but once he obtains the information, he would promptly proceed to apprehend the individual as well." While that may be true, there could be individuals who perceive themselves as exceptional and entertain the notion that they can successfully demand payment from Adolf in exchange for the information. Indeed, Alexander agreed. "Rest assured, I will receive immediate notification and swiftly resolve any such attempts before they even materialize. You need not worry. In the meantime, you need to commence with the small-scale protests in various cities. By doing so, when the actual coup takes place, it will appear to the international community as if the government was unintentionally toppled on a day marked by widespread protests, without any prior planning. Aaron reassured. I understand. Additionally, considering you mentioned having control over the generals, could you make them order the police departments so that they simply arrest our people without resorting to their usual brutal treatment of the protesters? Alexander inquired, expressing his desire to minimize casualties. I will inform them about it. However, it is also crucial to ensure that the protesters do not exert excessive effort. They should engage in normal protesting activities, and when the police arrive, they should disperse from the protest grounds. This will gradually condition the police to anticipate protests ending upon their arrival, leading to complacency. Consequently, on the day of the final protest, they will not arrive fully prepared, assuming that the protesters will disperse as usual. Aaron added. Rest assured, I have taken care of that aspect. All the newly recruited members who joined as a result of your efforts are completely conditioned to completely trust me, and I can guarantee their strict adherence to the given instructions, Alexander responded, exuding confidence in his tone. Very well. I must depart now and return to my hotel to attend to other plans, Aaron stated, rising from his chair. Alexander promptly accompanied him, guiding him to the elevator and through the lobby until they reached the hotel's exit. Their conversation continued until the valet arrived with Aaron's car, at which point Alexander bid him farewell. Aaron boarded the car and departed the hotel, heading back to his own accommodations, satisfied with the completion of all his scheduled meetings. The next day, Sir, 2 days after our visit to the military headquarters, as per our planned arrangement, the general made contact. Following the instructions outlined in the folder you provided, Walter issued a few initial orders to them. They are currently in the process of executing those orders. However, it appears that they require additional funding support due to being underfunded, John explained to Aaron inside a room where the 10 individuals holding important positions, assigned by Aaron, were gathered. This room served as the venue for their weekly meetings, allowing them to update each other and Aaron on the progress of the plan. Excellent. Utilize the funds available from your reserves to cover the necessary expenses, Aaron replied, instructing John to allocate the required finances. He had previously provided them with a substantial sum, estimated to be around $500 million in cash. We will do so, John answered back. How is the weapons procurement going? Aaron asked. With the backing of the military, we have successfully arranged for a sanctioned Navy vessel to intercept them in the middle of the ocean. They will transfer the cargo from their boat to the military vessel. As for storage, we have secured the Navy's port warehouse as a temporary solution until the renovation of the designated base is completed, Walter responded. He was responsible for overseeing the communication between their group and the military. How is the progress of the base renovation coming along? Aaron asked, seeking an update on the current status of the renovation project. By employing a significant number of local workers and providing them with competitive wages, we have successfully completed approximately 20% of the renovation. We anticipate finishing the entire renovation within the next 3 weeks, came the response, indicating the progress made on the base refurbishment. Have this week's group arrived yet? Aaron asked. They are scheduled to arrive tomorrow as their flight today was cancelled due to inclement weather, reported Paul, the Ares coordinator, providing an update on the situation. Turning his attention back to John, Aaron asked, how are the preparations for the D-Day progressing? We have successfully acquired over 150 houses near strategic locations, and they are currently undergoing renovations to suit our specific requirements. Once the weapons arrive and are securely stored in the military warehouses, they will undergo a final inspection to ensure their readiness and to remove any remaining trackers. Subsequently, we will begin transporting them to the designated houses, where they will be stored in preparation for the upcoming D-Day, John explained. When do you anticipate the completion of the renovations? Aaron asked. We expect everything to be ready and weapons to be stored in the houses within 2 months. Why is it taking such a long time when the base renovation is expected to take only about a month? Aaron asked. The slight delay is primarily attributed to a limited number of personnel available to oversee the renovations simultaneously. Consequently, we are currently selecting a smaller subset to commence the renovation process and intend to scale up the number of concurrent renovations as more members arrive in Eden, John explained, giving the reason behind the extended timeline. Very good, Aaron remarked, his expression conveying satisfaction as he nodded in approval upon hearing the positive update on the progress. Walter, seizing the opportunity, asked, "Sir, wouldn't it be more advantageous for us to have control over the leaders of the dictator's private forces, just as we have done with the generals?" That presents a challenge because the previous dictator deliberately kept his private forces divided to prevent any internal threat to his leadership. These forces are currently under different leaders and organized into various groups of differing sizes. The leaders who possess significant control over their respective factions tend to remain in close proximity to Adolf. Furthermore, due to the brutal actions of these forces against the public during Adolf and his father's reign, they cannot be assimilated into our ranks and instead need to be held accountable through prosecution after the coup is successfully completed. However, it is worth noting that most of these forces will not be combat-ready on the D-Day. The remaining combat-ready individuals will be dealt with by our group and the military. Therefore, there is no immediate necessity for us to gain control over them, Aaron explained to Walter, outlining the reasons why directly approaching the leaders and coercing them into compliance was not a viable option. For the time being, Aaron had no intention of divulging the newly imposed limitations he faced in using runic contracts. After returning from the meeting with the regional revolutionary leaders last week, Aaron had sought clarification from Nova regarding the sensation of the knot feeling slightly heavier than usual, questioning whether it was genuine or simply a figment of his imagination. "You are right. It really is getting smaller," Nova replied after seeking Aaron's permission to take control of the VR helmet in order to conduct some checks on his body and mind. "You mean the knot is getting heavier, right?" Aaron asked, wondering if Nova made a mistake with her statement, which should be impossible. No, it's not a mistake. When I said it's getting smaller, I meant it," Nova replied, noticing Aaron's perplexed expression. "What do you mean by that?" Aaron asked, his curiosity now piqued. "When you sign a runic contract, it is stored in the soul space of both Party A and Party B, as well as the space of the enforcer. So when you feel a knot being tied, it is simply the runic contract being stored in your soul space. So when I said it is getting smaller, I meant that your soul space is decreasing in size as it is being occupied by the runic contracts," Nova explained, clarifying her earlier statement. "So you're suggesting that the sensation of the knot getting heavier is due to the shrinking of the space?" Aaron asked, seeking further clarification. "No, the knot's increasing in weight has nothing to do with the space getting smaller." "Then what is the cause of it, and why didn't I feel the increase in weight of the knot when the Ares members signed their runic contracts with me?" Aaron asked, wanting to understand the underlying reasons. "The runic contract you are using is of the lowest level, which means it requires many specific conditions to be met in order to function flawlessly. In the case of the generals and some of the revolutionary leaders, not all of the conditions were fully met, leading to your discovery of the increase in the weight of the knot. On the other hand, when the Ares members signed the contract, they did so willingly and without any objections, fulfilling all the necessary conditions. This is why you didn't feel the increase in weight when they signed. The generals, however, were not completely willing to sign the contract and only did so under duress. As a result, the knot on your soul became heavier than usual because the contract rune didn't have all the conditions fulfilled. To ensure the generals and some of the revolutionary leaders do not break the contract in the future, the size of the contract rune needed to be increased, thus occupying more of your soul space and causing the heavier sensation in the knot, Nova explained calmly. "What exactly is this soul space you keep mentioning?" Aaron asked after the term kept being repeated by Nova in her explanation. "The soul space is where all the runic contracts are stored to monitor your soul's adherence to the clauses within the contract. If you violate the terms, the stored runic contracts can be accessed by the enforcer to administer the appropriate punishment for breaking the oath," Nova clarified. "Is there a maximum capacity for the soul space?" Aaron asked. "Yes, there is a maximum capacity for the soul space. Also, since you are using the lowest level of runic contract, each contract takes up a significant amount of space compared to higher-level contracts. Additionally, as both the enforcer and a party to the contract, your soul space is being consumed at twice the normal rate, as you have to accommodate 2 entities with each contract you sign," Nova explained. "Based on the size of my soul space, What is the maximum number of runic contracts that I can sign? He asked, his voice revealing his underlying worry, while his heart rate increased as he anxiously awaited the answer to his question. You have a maximum capacity of 1,000 runic contracts, and you have already used more than 720 of them, Nova replied, her tone conveying the weight of the situation. Shit, Aaron muttered in frustration upon hearing the answer. I had planned to utilize the runic contracts to simplify my tasks, but it appears that it was nothing more than a futile dream, he said, realizing that several of his future plans after the coup d'etat copyright tat would need to be reconsidered and reconstructed. Observing Aaron's turmoil, Nova gently patted his back and reassured him, saying, "It won't always be like this. The ongoing research in Lab City has discovered that your soul's level can be elevated under certain conditions. When the conditions are met, they expect the system to activate some of the runic lines among the billions of dormant ones in your body, leading to the evolution of your soul. This evolution should grant you various new benefits, including the expansion of your soul space. Alternatively, you can accumulate enough SP to purchase intermediate runic knowledge, allowing you to sign higher-level runic contracts that are smaller in size and occupy less space in your soul. This would enable you to sign more contracts than you can currently. Moving forward, I'll have to be more stringent when selecting individuals to enter into runic contracts until we unravel the conditions for triggering the evolution," Aaron murmured, his gaze still fixed on the floor. Meanwhile, Nova maintained her comforting presence, gently sliding her hand across Aaron's back. "I understand," Walter replied after hearing Aaron's answer. "Good, let's end today's meeting here and meet again next week." With those words, Aaron ended the meeting. 1 month later. Black site. Kasim could be seen pacing anxiously in his room, displaying visible signs of panic as he awaited someone's arrival. Knock knock. Upon hearing a knock at the door, Kasim swiftly moved to his chair, straightened his attire, cleared his throat, and then called out, "Come in." After obtaining permission to enter, Patrick, the project manager, nervously entered the room and said, "You called for me, sir?" "Yes, I summoned you because there is only 1 month left from the 4-month extension you requested to complete the program development. Is it going well? Are you on schedule?" Kasim fired 2 questions in quick succession, causing Patrick to tense up with each query directed at him. "Sir, you know," Patrick began, attempting to respond, but before he could finish his sentence, Kasim interrupted him, asking, "It's not ready yet, is it?" "Unfortunately, not yet, sir," Patrick answered, his head lowered in embarrassment and fear as he averted his gaze towards the floor. "Is there any possibility of completing it within the remaining month?" Kasim asked, his voice betraying his struggle to contain his anger, as if he were holding himself back from harming the man until he received an answer to this question. "It's almost impossible," Patrick replied, fully accepting his fate. "Get out and await the punishment to be determined for you and your team," Kasim shouted, his anger no longer under control. As Patrick hurried towards the door, Kasim threw a nameplate that bore his name, hitting Patrick in the back of his head just before he closed the door. A GHHHH, causing Patrick to cry out in pain, as he clutched his now swelling back head, as beads of sweat continued forming on his forehead. "Shit," Kasim muttered to himself after he was left alone in his office. Kasim's hand rested on the table, his finger tapping continuously as he deliberated on the course of action to take. Should he wait until next month, hoping for a miracle that would allow them to complete the program, or should he make the difficult decision to call his superior and inform him of the impossibility of the task, suggesting they proceed with their attack on the Rothschilds? The weight of the decision hung heavily on his shoulders as he considered the consequences of each choice. After pondering for more than 5 minutes, Kasim reached into his pocket and retrieved a burner phone. He dialed the number of his superior, making the difficult decision to inform them that they should move forward with their plans. By doing so, he hoped to mitigate the potential punishment he would face for not completing the program within the requested extension of the 4-month period. He pressed the call button and brought the phone to his ear, ready to deliver the news. "What is it?" came the voice on the other end as soon as the call was answered. "It's about the program research team," Kasim said, trying to maintain a respectful tone. "Go on and say it, we don't have all day," the voice on the other side impatiently urged Kasim to continue speaking. "Today I asked the project head about the expected completion timeline, But it appears that meeting your deadline is impossible. So, to avoid wasting your time in futile waiting, I suggest that you proceed with the plan without waiting for the program, sir, Kasim said, his voice cracking as he reached the last words, displaying his nervousness. Okay, the voice on the other end said, and then the call ended abruptly without any further words. I'm screwed, Kasim muttered under his breath, realizing that once their plans were complete, they would come after him and his team. At least we won't die, Kasim said with a hint of relief. He realized that by informing them early, he had managed to escape the potential consequences of waiting until the given timeline was over, which would have resulted in 4 months of unnecessary delay, making the consequences much heavier. Somewhere in America, a man wearing a displeased expression placed the phone back on the table. What's the problem, George? A voice asked, causing him to lift his head and gaze at the individuals seated along the sides of the long table, engaged in a meeting. It was Kasim, father, George answered. Is it good news, Aubrey? The man sitting at the head of the table asked after receiving the answer. No, father, it's not. He informed us that it is better that we move on and not waste our time waiting for them to complete the program, as they are still stuck in the same place, George replied. Looks like your side is not doing well either, Jason remarked with a smile on his face upon hearing George's answer. Looks like forcing the Secretary of Defense to take the program from them was pointless. It would have been better if we had simply kidnapped him and made him personally upgrade the program. Aubrey intervened upon seeing George's expression in response to Jason's comment. But that would have drawn too much attention if he had suddenly disappeared right after releasing the program. That's why we were compelled to pursue this course of action, George replied to his father's remark. I know that, and I remember your concerns about the potential risks involved. However, considering the program's significance and the impact it had on our plans, I can't help but think that kidnapping him would have been a more strategic move. We could have used the media to tarnish his reputation and divert public attention until the situation normalized. Having him in our custody would have eliminated the current problem we're facing, Aubrey responded to George's statement. Unfortunately, it seems that we have no other choice but to proceed with the plan without relying on the program, Jason interjected, acknowledging the reality of the situation. Aubrey said, addressing the board members in the office, all of whom were responsible for overseeing different black sites, inform the planning teams that they have 1 week to finalize the revised plan. We will initiate our attack immediately 1 week after that. Is that clear to everyone? Yes, all the board members, including George, replied in unison, signaling their understanding and agreement with the timeline for the upcoming attack. Okay, let's conclude the meeting for today, Aubrey announced, prompting the board members to rise from their seats and begin exiting the board meeting room. After everyone had left the room, leaving only George and his father Aubrey, the latter spoke up. You knew that the board members are going to use this against you, right? Yes, George answered. Then why did you react that way when Jason spoke? Aubrey asked. I just wanted to put him back in his place. His black site failed to accomplish anything even after they received the copies of my research. He tried to shape it as if I'm the only one at fault, George answered confidently, showing no concern for his father's remarks. Seeing his reaction, Aubrey smiled with an expression of pride on his face. He placed his hands on his son's shoulders and began speaking. Good. That's how you're supposed to be. The board members will always be looking for ways to gain leverage against you and advance their own agendas. Maintaining this confidence is essential. Yes, Father, George replied with a smile on his face, feeling quite satisfied to receive a compliment from his father every now and then. Yes, always bear in mind that you are the future head of the Morgan family. It is crucial for you to have complete control over those who work under you, Aubrey emphasized. Do you grasp the implications of what I'm saying? Yes, Father. I will ensure that Kasim and his team are punished heavily so that they refrain from making empty promises in the future, George replied, prompting his father's smile to grow wider. Good, but don't take it too far, Aubrey said, offering a word of caution. Yes, Father, George replied, maintaining the smile on his face. 2 weeks later, John Harrison entered his workplace, TPG Capital, with an air of nervousness enveloping him. Beads of sweat formed on his forehead as he glanced around the bustling trading floor. Colleagues hurriedly passed by, eyes focused on multiple screens displaying stock prices, charts, and market data. It was a typical Monday morning, but today was different for John. As he made his way to his desk, John forced himself to greet his colleagues with a shaky smile. "Morning, Sharon," he muttered, wiping his clammy hands on his pants. Sharon, hearing John's nervous greeting, raised an eyebrow but responded with a curt nod before diving back into her work. With trembling hands, John logged into his workstation, his heart pounding in his chest. As the clock ticked closer to the opening bell, John's anxiety intensified. His eyes darted around the room, looking for any signs of suspicion. The once familiar environment now felt suffocating, the weight of his actions bearing down on him. With trembling fingers, John entered a series of complex commands into the trading program. He carefully specified the timing, ensuring the trades would be initiated at the designated time. After inputting all the orders, he hesitated for a moment as his finger hovered over the final button. With a deep breath, he pressed enter. Officially firing the first shot in the attack against the Rothschilds. Somewhere in America. "George, are you certain that the man you selected will carry out the instructions and not just give up midway?" asked Aubrey. They were the sole occupants of a lavishly furnished room, accompanied by a towering screen exhibiting stock market charts before them. They were conversing to pass time as they awaited the execution of the planned attack and for the results of it to be reflected on the large screen. All necessary preparations and instructions had been meticulously programmed into their systems, leaving only the execution of their prearranged commands. "You needn't worry, Father," George responded assuredly. "If he still desires the safe return of his family, he will fulfill our instructions." "Remember, son," Aubrey imparted, attempting to instill a valuable lesson. "Do not assume that something will be accomplished until it is actually done. Otherwise, you may find yourself betrayed at the most unexpected moment. It is crucial to avoid placing unwavering expectations on others, regardless of any leverage you may hold against them, in order to shield yourself from the shock of their betrayal. That's precisely why I have contingencies in place for such situations," George affirmed, acknowledging his father's concern. "Good. Make sure you are always prepared like this," Ori said, a satisfied smile adorning his face. "I understand, Father," George acknowledged his father's wisdom, refraining from expressing any disagreement. He was well aware that he could be replaced by his brothers should his father ever grow dissatisfied with him. "It has begun. It seems there is no necessity for the backups to take action. Congratulations, son," Aubrey commended his son as soon as the screen before them displayed the market's descent. As Arya delved into the files pertaining to his business, he asked Charlotte, "Has she transferred the funds from her investment account, or do they remain untouched?" "No transactions took place during the short period we could monitor the account. Once she deposited the funds, she assumed personal control over the account and utilized her authority as the CEO to restrict access to the account's information for everyone," Charlotte responded. "What on earth does she intend to invest in with that money, anyway?" Arya exclaimed upon hearing Charlotte's response. "I don't know, sir," Charlotte replied honestly. Arya glanced at Charlotte and stated, "My question wasn't directed at you." Upon receiving the response, Charlotte felt a twinge of embarrassment, yet she composed herself and bid Arya farewell. She then made her way back to her office to carry on with her work. Once Arya found himself alone, he redirected his attention towards his work. However, just as his concentration was regained, Charlotte abruptly barged into the room without even seeking permission. Bursting in with urgency, she exclaimed, "Sir, something terrible is happening in the stock market," while attempting to hand him the tablet she held in her hand. Arya, on the verge of reprimanding Charlotte for her uninvited entrance, found his words caught in his throat as he received the tablet and witnessed its contents. Gathering himself quickly, he attempted to repeat his question, "What is Goya?" but was abruptly interrupted by the incessant ringing of his office phones, a realization dawning upon him that the tablet's contents were far from a mere prank. He answered one of the calls and asked, "What is it?" "Sir, the stock market is plummeting, and your personal investments are reporting significant losses," the voice on the other end relayed, representing Arya's designated private investment monitor. Arya's memory kicked in, and he queried, "As far as I recall, my investments are under the control of high-frequency traders, HFTs. and they should be sold once the losses reach a certain threshold. Am I mistaken? He asked, directing his question to his investment manager. Yes, sir, they are currently executing the sales, but the market is flooded with similar actions, causing a delay in selling the shares. Consequently, the prices are plummeting, resulting in escalating losses, his investment manager explained. Fuck. Minimize the losses as much as you can, Arya exclaimed, cutting off the call without waiting for a response. He swiftly answered the second ringing phone, to address the unfolding crisis. Another call from one of his private investment managers reiterated the disheartening news. After concluding the conversation, Arya chose to ignore the subsequent incoming calls, leaving Charlotte to handle them in his stead. What could be the reason behind this? Arya muttered anxiously, his gaze fixated on the stock market data displayed on his screen, clearly indicating the market's downward spiral. Despite also being responsible for overseeing one of the family's investment funds, Arya understood that his team would only contact him once they had managed to minimize the damage, providing him with a comprehensive assessment of the losses incurred. No signs of this crash were evident in the market in recent days. If this was avoidable and I missed it, then I'm in deep trouble, he ruminated silently, his eyes fixed on the screen, unable to tear himself away from the unfolding situation. Hey, Rena, it has started, Ava informed, alerting Rena to the commencement of the Morgans' attack. Rena halted whatever she was engaged in and shifted her gaze to the computer screen, where the falling stock market confirmed the unfolding events. Arya must be freaking out right now, Rena remarked, a mischievous smile gracing her face at the mere thought of her brother experiencing extreme distress. What is the projected loss for our family businesses once it's all said and done? Rena asked Ava, seeking an estimate of the anticipated impact. At the very least, your family businesses are expected to incur a loss of no less than $750 billion in assets, Ava reported, conveying the initial estimate. The precise amount can only be determined once everything has concluded. Once everything is finalized and the losses are calculated, I will be the sole beneficiary, Rena declared, a smile forming on her face. Don't you feel any sadness seeing your own family suffer such significant financial losses? Ava questioned Rena, seeking to understand her perspective. I am indeed affected, but not to a great extent since I don't have control over the money at the moment. Instead of feeling sadness or hurt, I am filled with anticipation. I can hardly wait to witness Arya's expression when the full extent of the damage is revealed, Rena responded, her smile slightly diminishing but still present. That's true. Not only Arya but also the other family members entrusted with the control of different family funds will face the loss of support from the board and other family members. It will likely lead to the family head removing Arya from his current position, which in turn will restart the power struggle for the position. This presents you with the perfect opportunity to seize that position once and for all, Ava explained, emphasizing the potential consequences of the unfolding events. Yes, that's where the control over the board members becomes valuable. All I need to do is instruct them to shift most of the blame onto Arya, highlighting his responsibility for the majority of the family business while the family head assumed a more passive role. If the conversation is steered in that direction, the family head may ultimately agree to their proposition, Rena explained, outlining her strategy to leverage the board members' influence in order to shift accountability and further her own ambitions. But you won't be able to avoid scrutiny either. Arya may inquire about the personal loan you took and whether your investments have been successful or if you've incurred losses, potentially requiring the family's assistance. It's crucial that you make a decision now regarding how you'll address this matter when he brings it up as a diversionary tactic, Ava reminded Rena, emphasizing the need for her to formulate a clear response in advance. Not at this moment. I will make a decision about whether or not to disclose it once I assess the extent of my gains from this event. If I have profited significantly, it would be wise to withhold the information to avoid raising any suspicions regarding my knowledge of the situation. Arya might even attempt to paint a picture of me conspiring with the Morgans to orchestrate his downfall and seize his position, resulting in the family having heavy losses, Rena replied, her mind immersed in contemplation after Ava's reminder. Sir, the Morgans have initiated their actions, Nova informed Aaron, who was engrossed in reading a document within the Universal simulation. So, they've chosen today to make their moves. Excellent. This will divert the international community's attention towards America for approximately a month, allowing us to evade their scrutiny entirely, Aaron remarked, shifting his focus back to Nova as he responded. As they say, when America's economy sneezes, the rest of the world catches a cold, Nova replied with a smile. Bring up the chart. Let's examine which aspects our simulations accurately predicted and where we may have overlooked certain factors, Aaron instructed, setting aside the document he was reading and directing his complete attention to the unfolding events. Yes, sir, Nova responded, materializing hundreds of holographic screens, some displaying information in green and others in red. Once the complete visualization appeared, she explained, the green screens represent predictions we made with complete accuracy. However, the red screens indicate that while our predictions were correct, there were certain degrees of deviation. As a result, we are still benefiting from those situations, but not to the extent we initially anticipated. The stock market crash worsened as time went on, with each passing moment bringing further decline. After 15 minutes of continuous descent, there was a brief pause before the market, like a resurrected force, began to rise again. In a matter of minutes, everything reverted back to its previous state prior to the fall, and astonishingly, the market even surged higher than its pre-crash levels. George let out a sigh of relief when he noticed his watch displaying that 15 minutes had passed. As the stock market began to stabilize, it became evident that their plan had borne fruit and was now reaching its final steps for a successful conclusion. With a satisfied smile on his face, Aubrey exclaimed, "It's finally over." "Yes, Father," George said with a sense of satisfaction. "Now all that's left is to calculate the losses we inflicted upon them and the gains we secured." He couldn't help but feel pleased that his meticulously crafted plan, hatched from his black site, had enabled his family to seek revenge against the Rothschilds. Upon hearing his son's response and realizing that his son understood the importance of waiting for the final results before celebrating, he smiled and said, "Good, that's the right attitude. You must ensure that everything is truly concluded before indulging in celebration." He gently patted his son on the shoulder, acknowledging his maturity. "The final results should be in our possession by the end of the day. You can go and rest, Father." "I will inform you as soon as they arrive," George assured his father. "I will do just that. Keep up the excellent work," his father replied. "Yes, Father," George acknowledged, as he watched his father stand up from the sofa and exit the room. As soon as his father was out of sight, George couldn't contain his excitement any longer. He began jumping and celebrating, reveling in the victory they had achieved. Aaron, having observed the unfolding chaos within the universal simulation, began to feel weary as he watched the hundreds of screens that Nova had materialized. As a result of the time acceleration within the universal simulation, Aaron found himself watching the screens for over an hour and 15 minutes, even though he had little comprehension of the events that were taking place. When Aaron witnessed the charts, which had been depicting a downward trend, suddenly start to rise again, he turned towards Nova, who had remained silent all this time, and inquired, "Is it finally over?" "Yes, it's finally over, and now it's time to tally the spoils," Nova said with a smile on her face. "How much did the market lose during those 15 minutes?" Aaron asked. His curiosity piqued as he sought to understand the extent of damage inflicted upon the global economy in the Morgans' vengeful pursuit. "During those 15 minutes, the stock market lost $4 trillion, Nova explained, responding to Aaron's query. However, shortly after the fall ended, the market regained its lost value. Although the value and money have been recovered, they are now in the hands of the winners." Aaron, aware that he was among those who had gained the most, allowed a brief smile to grace his face before he regained his composure. He then asked, "Out of the trillions that were lost, how much of it was lost by the Rothschilds?" He wanted to understand the extent of damage inflicted upon the Rothschild family by the Morgans. Nova, having already utilized her quantum computer to perform the necessary calculations as soon as the fall ended, provided an answer. During the fall, as it caught them by surprise, the Rothschilds incurred losses of approximately $2 trillion, she explained. However, once they identified the cause, they were able to recover around $700 billion as the market began its recovery. So, in total, their losses amount to roughly $1.3 trillion. Wow, the Morgans managed to strike the Rothschilds from an unexpected angle this time, Aaron remarked. Now, I'm curious, how much did the Morgans gain from this situation? $746 billion, Nova answered. Wow, that can indeed be seen as a resounding victory for the Morgans, Aaron exclaimed. If we take into account the losses they caused to the Rothschilds, their total gains would amount to almost $2 trillion. Although they achieved favorable outcomes, it appears that the Morgans earned less than their initial estimates for gains from this attack, Nova added, noticing Aaron's amazement. Hearing this, Aaron gave a knowing smile before he asked, was it because of us? There are two reasons, and one of them is indeed due to our involvement, Nova explained. The other reason lies in the utilization of humans for planning. While they relied on their supercomputer to estimate the course of the fall, incorporating human input created blind spots due to their limited knowledge of the stock market compared to mine. Our inclusion in the game also caused some of their strategies to go awry. As a result, they earned only half of what they had expected from this attack. We can consider ourselves to have won half of the remaining spoils, while the rest is shared among those who recognized the situation and managed to secure their own gains. That's true, Aaron acknowledged, reaching out to pull one of the holographic screens closer to examine its contents. Nova observed as Aaron delved into his examination of the holographic screens. After a brief period, Aaron redirected his attention towards Nova and made a request, saying, provide me with a comprehensive summary of everything that occurred, starting from the beginning until the end, including our gains from this event. Explain it in simple terms since, despite reading the entire plan, I still have some aspects that I struggle to comprehend. Sure, Nova, before she started detailing the entire events. Everything that resulted in the $4 trillion to disappear from the stock market started from here, a financial company called TPG Capital, Nova said as she materialized a holographic screen with the image of the company showing it to Aaron. A man working here known as John Harrison, a man who they controlled by threatening him with the lives of his family members, programmed the sale algorithm to sell $10 billion worth of E-mini S&P 500 futures contracts at a specific time. To simplify, these contracts are tied directly to the overall value of the S&P 500, which is an index representing the performance of the 500 largest stocks in the market. Normally, a trade of this magnitude would take place gradually over approximately 7 hours. However, under the Morgan's order, Mr. Harrison set it so that the sell algorithm disregarded time and price constraints and to sell the contracts as fast as possible. Following its instructions, it started selling the contracts as quickly as possible, regardless of the prevailing prices. As you already know, the principles of supply and demand dictate that when a substantial number of contracts are rapidly sold, prices tend to decline. With that, he had completed what they needed from him, and from there onward the weaknesses in the economic system would be doing the remainder of the work. The now extremely low-priced futures started being spread to every place by other flawed algorithms, particularly those known as high-frequency trading algorithms. These algorithms are designed to execute numerous trades rapidly. Often, high-frequency traders serve as market makers, essentially acting as intermediaries who buy an asset when it is being sold, enabling them to sell it to potential buyers at a higher price and profit from the difference. A significant portion of the $10 billion worth of contracts sold by TCP Capital were swiftly purchased by high-frequency traders. However, HFTs have one weakness that the Morgans plan to exploit for their plan. High-frequency traders prefer not to hold onto contracts. Their modus operandi is to buy and promptly sell them. Consequently, a multitude of high-frequency traders started offloading the contracts onto other high-frequency traders, who then passed them on to yet more high-frequency traders, creating a never-ending cycle. This continuous exchange of contracts resembled a hazardous game of passing the grenade that wreaked havoc on the market, driving prices down and causing chaos. This situation led to another predicament. Many of the algorithms functioning as market makers hit pre-programmed thresholds that compelled them to exit the market due to the rapid decline in prices and increased risk. As the market makers withdrew, liquidity was drastically reduced, causing the market to plunge even further. The crash in the futures market spilled over into the stock market due to a group of individuals known as arbitrage traders. When you purchase a future, you are essentially acquiring a stock that will be delivered at a later date. Arbitrage traders noticed that S&P futures contracts were becoming inexpensive, while the S&P stocks underlying those futures remained expensive. Seeing the opportunity, they began selling their costly regular stocks to purchase the cheaper future versions of the same stocks. This rapid selling of stocks essentially transferred the impact of the futures crash to the stock market. With the impact now transferred, the fall continued, seeming as if there is no tomorrow. The fall caused panic, and almost everyone with shares that were falling started panic selling their stocks in order to reduce the losses they would be receiving if they continued holding them. But everything came to a halt when the stop logic functionality, implemented by the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, became active, effectively stopping all trades for 5 seconds. When trading resumed, fortunately, the panic had subsided, and people realized that stocks had dropped without a valid reason. This realization meant that stocks were now available at a discounted price, prompting a buying spree that pushed the prices back up to their pre-crash levels. The Morgans, being the ones who came up with the plan, meant that they possessed the knowledge to prepare the most efficient means of maximizing profits. Despite benefiting from their actions, just like them, our main source of profit did not originate from their tactics. Nova paused, allowing Aaron time to digest the information she had shared. After taking a moment to process the information, he raised his head and asked with curiosity, "So, how did we manage to make profits in a way that outsmarted the Morgans?" His expression showed genuine interest. "When we finally had the complete plan from the black sites, I leveraged my computing power to simulate their strategy. Through conducting multiple simulations with different parameters, I was able to uncover something that had eluded them." Nova paused, building suspense, prompting Aaron to ask, "What did you discover?" He played along with her act. "Blue chip stocks," Nova responded with a single word. Aaron sought clarification, stating, "If I understand correctly, blue chip stocks are shares issued by prominent companies that are well established, financially stable, and hold an outstanding reputation. Is that accurate?" He wanted to ensure they were both on the same page and understood the concept being discussed. "Yes," Nova nodded in agreement. Aaron tilted his head to the side, guessing, and asked, "Did you short sell them or something?" "No, it wasn't quite like that," Nova explained. "Based on the insights gained from the simulations I conducted, I strategically purchased billions of dollars worth of blue chip stocks from various companies. I utilized thousands of my accounts to execute these transactions." "Go on then," Aaron said, then fell silent, determined to let Nova finish her explanation without interruption. Nova understood Aaron's intention and proceeded with her explanation. During the crash, certain blue-chip stocks such as Echelon, Accenture, Centerpoint Energy, and many others experienced a drastic decline in their trading value. These stocks, which were previously traded at around $40, suddenly plummeted to just 1 penny per share. Aaron's surprise shattered his intention to remain silent until the explanation's completion. "What on earth? How did that happen? Did you hack and manipulate the system?" he exclaimed, his astonishment evident in his voice. "No, sir. Their system was functioning exactly as programmed. The phenomenon was caused by a practice known as stub quoting," Nova clarified. "As I mentioned earlier, high-frequency traders, HFTs, act as market makers, which means that at any given time, there are individuals looking to sell a stock and others who want to buy it. However, these two parties may not align perfectly. Sometimes there is an excess of sellers, while at other times, there may be more buyers. HFTs play the role of intermediaries in such situations. When someone wants to sell a stock, the HFTs purchase it, and as soon as they find a buyer, they resell it." Stub quoting refers to a scenario where a seller intends to sell their stocks, but the HFTs lack the necessary liquidity or available funds to make the purchase. In such cases, the HFTs would submit a nominal bid, typically 1 penny, which is not intended to be a genuine offer. Instead, it serves as an indication that they are unable to buy the stocks at that moment. Typically, the seller would then seek out another market maker who possesses the required liquidity and can provide a legitimate offer for the stocks. During the flash crash, a significant number of market makers withdrew from the market, causing a severe scarcity of liquidity. As a result, the only available purchase offers for the shares were priced at 1 penny. In this scenario, the sellers, which were algorithmically programmed to sell the shares regardless of the price, ultimately accepted the 1 penny offers, resulting in the sale of stocks that would typically be valued at $40 for a mere penny. Wow, Aaron couldn't help but exclaim as he absorbed Nova's explanation. He was genuinely impressed. Nova smiled and continued, but that's not all. Some ordinary stocks, such as Sotheby's, Apple, HP, and many others, experienced an astonishing surge, skyrocketing from $40 to $100,000 per share. The reason behind this was precisely the same but in reverse. Buying algorithms were attempting to purchase certain stocks they deemed safe from the ongoing crash from market makers who, in turn, did not wish to sell. As a response, the market makers submitted a high stub quote of $100,000 to indicate their unavailability to sell at that time. However, since the buyers were algorithms and the market makers had withdrawn, the $100,000 offer remained the sole option. Consequently, the buying algorithms ended up purchasing stocks valued at $40 for an exorbitant price of $100,000. Amidst the chaos unfolding in the market, I emerged as the foremost trader among those purchasing shares for a mere penny, while also capitalizing on the opportunity to sell other shares I had previously purchased for an astonishing $100,000. As a result, we emerged as one of the primary beneficiaries of the market crash, securing a significant win in the process. Although the entire sequence may appear lengthy, it transpired within a matter of mere minutes before the trading halt of 5 seconds was enforced. Nevertheless, this short duration provided us with an opportunity to secure over 75% of our overall gains from the market crash. Nova concluded her explanation and broke into a laughter that echoed with a touch of villainous amusement. Having fully comprehended Nova's explanation, Aaron expressed his thoughts, saying, "This entire plan relied on the delicate market dynamics where sellers and buyers were algorithmic entities, facilitated by market makers that were also algorithms. It's a scheme that would undoubtedly elude human thinkers, and even if they stumbled upon it, they wouldn't dare take the risk that you did." Aaron commended Nova for her actions. With sufficient data points and powerful computing power, risks become non-existent, Nova replied, sporting a smug expression on her face, playfully jesting about the advantages of having access to a powerful computer. Aaron reacted to Nova's smugness with a scoff before proceeding to ask, "So, what are our total winnings?" "Our total gain amounts to $278 billion, but if we exclude Rena's share, we have gained about $180 billion, Nova explained. The remaining portion, approximately $98 billion, constitutes Rena's share. That's surreal. The power of predicting market outcomes is truly astonishing, but it also carries a certain level of fear," Aaron admitted, his tone conveying a mix of awe and trepidation. "We've transformed our initial $22 billion into over $278 billion. Aaron couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at what Nova had done. "True," Aaron then asked, "did you sell the shares you bought for pennies, or are you still holding onto them?" He was curious whether their winnings comprised purely cash or a combination of cash and shares. "I sold those shares when the market rebounded because there was no benefit in holding onto them," Nova explained. "Indeed, I'm curious to see how they will attempt to cover up the entire ordeal. It seems like a rather precarious situation, as the investigators only need to identify the primary beneficiaries," Aaron remarked, contemplating the potential challenges faced by those involved in the scheme. "Just like us, the Morgans also employed thousands of different accounts, which was easier for them due to their control over multiple financial companies," Nova explained. "Furthermore, it's worth noting that my computing power allows me to summarize information quickly. However, if you recall, it took the Morgans over a year to finalize their attack plan. This suggests that the sex investigation is likely to take even longer." Nova continued, "During this time, the Morgans can leverage the academic institutes they fund to release peer-reviewed research presenting various theories about the cause of the crash. By muddying the waters and introducing numerous theories, such as decentralization, spoofing, and technical glitches, they can create a scenario where different causes are going to be in the debate. This strategy can effectively delay the investigation for more than a decade, especially if the Morgans use their political influence to prematurely end the investigation. That's to our advantage as well," Aaron commented, a smile stretching across his face. He expressed his contentment, recognizing that the Morgans had taken care of all the meticulous planning, the subsequent cover-up, and every intricate detail in between. All we had to do was capitalize on the situation and reap the benefits, he added, acknowledging the substantial financial gains they had effortlessly acquired. Yes, Nova nodded, agreeing with Aaron's observation. What? Rena exclaimed in disbelief upon hearing the staggering amount she had earned from the crash. Her surprise was evident in her tone as she sought confirmation. Are you sure? She asked, still struggling to grasp the magnitude of her earnings. Ava, maintaining her composure, responded calmly, yes, that's what Mother sent me, she replied, displaying the impressive figure on the screen, leaving no room for doubt. What? Rena exclaimed in disbelief upon hearing the staggering amount she had earned from the crash. Her surprise was evident in her tone as she sought confirmation. Are you sure? She asked, still struggling to grasp the magnitude of her earnings. Ava, maintaining her composure, responded calmly, yes, that's what Mother sent me, she replied, displaying the impressive figure on the screen, leaving no room for doubt. As Rena's eyes remained fixed on the screen, her appreciation and gratitude towards Aaron swelled within her. It was his ingenuity and efforts that had made this incredible feat possible. Overwhelmed by these thoughts, she reached for the phone he had given her during their first meeting and dialed his number, wanting to express her gratefulness. After a brief period of ringing, Aaron picked up the call and greeted, Hello. Hello, Aaron. How are you? Rena asked, trying to maintain her composure despite the excitement bubbling within her, having been left thrilled by the sight of her share. I've been doing well, Aaron responded, his voice calm, and how about you? Thanks to you, I'm doing even better, Rena replied with gratitude in her voice. You didn't just call to check up on me, did you? Aaron asked playfully, indicating for Rena to go to the point. No, I called to express my gratitude for all the help you've been giving me, Rena said sincerely. No problem. I'm doing this because I know that in the future, I'll be receiving something from you in return. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement, Aaron responded with a chuckle. I understand that, but I truly believe that whatever you may ask of me in return will never be enough to match the immense value I've gained from your assistance. So, I want you to know that I'm sincerely grateful for all that you've done, Rena insisted. Following their conversation, they continued discussing various topics. After a few more minutes, Aaron spoke up, saying, if you encounter any other problems or need assistance, don't hesitate to ask me. Sure, I will remember that, Rena replied. After exchanging a few more goodbyes, they ended the call, promising to meet again once they had completed their current endeavors. The moment the phone call ended, Ava interjected and said, Rena, the family head has called for an emergency meeting and you are among the attendees. It will be held in 3 hours to ensure all board members can attend. Since he called for me despite not being a board member, it looks like the competition is finally going to continue, Rena said, feeling very happy that she would have another opportunity to compete with Arya. Yes, it certainly seems that way, Ava replied. But this time it's going to be different, Rena said with a smile as she shifted her focus back to her computer. She began discussing with Ava their plans for the upcoming meeting. With Aaron's assistance being sustained only until the market crash, which had concluded half an hour ago, Rena knew that from now on she would be on her own. However, instead of feeling worried, she felt a surge of excitement as she welcomed the complete control that was being returned to her. 2 hours later. Board meeting room. Why is she here? Arya asked, pointing at Rena, for not being a board member and still being in the meeting room. The family head called for me, Rena answered simply, before redirecting her attention back to her tasks. As Arya processed her response, a sinking feeling enveloped him. He realized that he was in trouble or, at the very least, that he stood to lose something while Rena had the potential to gain. Did you lose the personal loan you had taken from the banks? Arya asked, strategically aiming to plant a seed of curiosity in the minds of other board members. His intention was to pave the way for the topic to be raised in the meeting by the board members he still believed are on his side, hoping to minimize the time spent discussing his own losses. However, all of Arya's hopes were shattered when Hebel, one of the board members, interrupted and said, since everyone is here, let's begin the meeting. We don't have to waste any more time. His timely intervention derailed Arya's plan completely, as it appeared that no one had even heard his question. With the family head nodding in approval, the board members' words were acknowledged, and the meeting secretary took the podium to commence the proceedings. As it was an emergency meeting, the meeting secretary bypassed the usual formalities and promptly delved into the main topic. 3 hours ago, the stock market experienced a significant fall, but after 15 minutes of continuous fall, it returned to normal. However, in the aftermath, our family businesses and other ventures have incurred heavy losses amounting to approximately $1 trillion. It will take approximately a week to calculate the full extent of the losses, the secretary announced. Upon hearing the estimated loss, Arya and the other board members couldn't help but take a deep breath. While they had anticipated significant losses based on the decline of the hedge funds they each controlled, the fact that the preliminary calculations amounted to over $1 trillion was staggering. It indicated that the final loss figure would likely surpass the current estimate. Do we know what caused it? Yoel asked the secretary. At the moment, we aren't sure, the secretary replied. However, the losses we incurred during the fall seemed to be concentrated in areas where most of our known investments were located. As a result, we suspect some of our known enemies, but our primary suspicion is on the Morgans. Why would you primarily suspect the Morgans? Uriah asked after hearing the secretary's reply. If they attacked to recover from their previous losses, then it is understandable, Rena interjected, offering her reasoning. Her comment earned her a side eye from Arya, and if looks could kill, it would have been her third death today. Immediately after Rena gave her opinion, the meeting secretary resumed her statement. The entity that had the largest losses in our hedge funds is Hedge Fund 1, which lost more than half of its value due to mistakes made by the team in an attempt to reduce losses, she explained. Arya, hearing this, lowered his head in embarrassment as Hedge Fund 1 was under his control. The secretary, indifferent to his reaction, pressed on. This is followed by Hedge Fund 17, then Funds 43, 10, 4, 23, 8. She went on to list all the funds until each one had been accounted for, and then moved on to other losses that had been incurred. When the secretary concluded her report, the family head, who had remained silent throughout the meeting, finally spoke up. What is the cause of different funds experiencing varying losses? He asked. The secretary promptly responded. It all boils down to how the teams managing those funds reacted to the crisis. The family head's eyebrows furrowed as he processed the information. So, you mean to say that our largest publicly known fund, Hedge Fund 1, lost more than half of its value simply because the team in charge panicked and made poor decisions? Who is responsible for overseeing that fund? He questioned. Father. I mean, family head. I assure you, I will ensure that such a problem does not repeat itself. Arya responded, his voice laced with nervousness. He was acutely aware that any misstep in handling this situation will have dire consequences for his future. Why weren't you prepared before the crisis occurred? Will you always wait until something goes wrong before implementing any countermeasures? The family head questioned, his tone conveying feelings of disappointment. No, sir. I always strive to simulate various crises in order to be prepared. However, the specific situation we faced was not accounted for in our crisis manuals. Arya tried to provide a justification for not being fully prepared. Rena interjected, seeking to expose his lack of preparedness. So, you're suggesting that despite simulating different market crises, you failed to develop countermeasures for an immediate market fall? Arya attempted to shift the focus away from himself by pointing out that others also experienced losses. Everyone incurred losses. Why are you singling me out? Rena countered, highlighting the severity of Arya's losses compared to others. But you're the only one who lost more than half of your funds. While others may have been less prepared, their losses were limited to around 25%. As the leader of our largest publicly known fund, your significant losses indicate a lack of readiness on your part. Arya, on the verge of losing his temper, attempted to respond, but caught himself and regained control. However, his outburst had already occurred. Enough, the family head said, commanding everyone's attention and putting an end to the ongoing banter. The room fell silent as all eyes turned towards him, awaiting his decision. Since the losses were a result of the team leader's lack of preparedness, everyone will face consequences proportional to the extent of their losses, the family head announced, his calm demeanor sending shivers down everyone's spines. The attendees knew that the more composed he appeared, the more serious the situation was. Without hesitation, the family head continued, as you incurred the largest loss, your punishment will also be the most severe. You will be relieved of your position and demoted to your previous role. The weight of his words sank in as the family head's gaze fell upon Arya, leaving no room for negotiation or appeal. Turning his attention to Rena, the family head addressed her directly. With his demotion, the position is now vacant, officially reinstating the competition for my successor. To ensure fair competition, you will be reinstated as a board member and assigned to a company of similar size to the one Arya will be transferred to. The family head shifted his gaze to the center of the table, his voice carrying a sense of finality. The remaining members' punishments will be announced 1 week from now, once the full extent of the losses has been tallied. On the same day, we will also discuss the countermeasures and plans for recovering from the loss. You have 1 week to prepare strategies for the recovery. With that, the family head promptly stood up and left the meeting room, officially ending the meeting. Find all of those who had substantial gains during the crash and bring the list to me. I want to find out if it is either luck or if they knew about our plans ahead of time. George gave the order to the presenter when he realized that their gains were not up to their expectations. But sir, if they were privy to our plan, they would have likely employed a similar strategy of using multiple accounts for their trades. Consequently, it will be an arduous and time-consuming task to identify them, if we can even find the evidence at all, the presenter replied, unafraid to provide his rationale, fully aware that if he simply accepted the task and failed, he would face severe consequences. I am not concerned about the duration required to locate them. Their actions resulted in our anticipated gains of over $1 trillion being diminished to a mere $700 billion, with more than $300 billion being taken away from us. Do you think I care about the time and resources needed to find them? Just get it done, George ordered sternly, his tone leaving no room for any response other than compliance. Yes, sir, the presenter replied obediently before exiting the meeting room, allowing the family and board members to have a private discussion among themselves. Why do you believe that someone had knowledge of our plans? Aubrey inquired, curious to understand what his son had observed from the presentations after the presenter had left. Based on our calculations and numerous simulations, we had a comprehensive understanding of the events that were expected to unfold, and we made appropriate preparations. When the market crash occurred, everything transpired as planned, from the substantial loss of around $4 trillion to the subsequent recovery after a brief pause. However, the significant deviation came in the form of our gains. Our projections indicated that our gains would surpass the trillion mark, but they fell short and amounted to only around $700 billion. This suggests that either our calculations contained an error or an unforeseen factor intervened. The most influential factor that could account for such a substantial deviation from our expectations is the possibility of someone else being aware of our plan and taking measures to claim a share of our winnings, George elaborated, outlining his reasoning to the others. That's true. Ensure that you investigate the cause of the deviation and retrieve what was taken from us. However, let's not forget to celebrate the victory in the present moment. A win is a win, so let's celebrate it first before shifting our focus to uncovering the source of the issue, Aubrey emphasized, reminding everyone to appreciate and acknowledge their success before delving into the investigation. Upon hearing his father's words, George composed himself and responded, "Yes, father. I intended to celebrate the victory, especially knowing that we managed to inflict damage on the Rothschilds as planned." He made a conscious decision to set aside his anger towards those who exploited their actions for personal gain, saving it for later consideration. Good, Aubrey said, a smile gracing his face. He then shifted his gaze towards the other board members in the room, who had remained silent throughout the father-son exchange. Let's reconvene for another meeting after the celebration, he announced, effectively concluding the day's meeting. A universal simulation. With the Morgans no longer in our path, it's time to escalate the revolutionary movements, Aaron remarked to Nova. What do you have in mind? Nova asked excitedly. When Felix approached him to seek his assistance in acquiring the telecommunications companies, didn't we assure Adolf that gaining control over the internet would also provide us with the capability to monitor it? Ooh, I see where you're going with this, Nova responded with enthusiasm. You want to leverage our control over the internet to manipulate Adolf into arresting the other revolutionary leaders. By eliminating their leadership, their groups will become leaderless, ultimately paving the way for Alexander's group to take charge. Exactly, Aaron confirmed. Not only that, but it will create a sense of chaos and unrest in numerous cities, compelling Adolf to deploy military forces to suppress the protests. He won't want the protests to persist until the day of the event. By using him to send soldiers to these cities, we can strategically position our forces to take control of the local governing bodies in the cities when the time is right. It's like killing two birds with one stone. Should I also prepare to intensify the turmoil by spreading the news of their arrests immediately after they occur, or should I let it unfold naturally? Nova asked. Aaron paused for a moment, contemplating Nova's suggestion. I think it's best to let it unfold naturally for now, he replied, carefully considering the potential implications. Allow the news of their arrests to spread gradually and organically. We want the impact to reverberate throughout the revolutionary circles, creating a sense of uncertainty and instability. It will further disrupt their cohesion and solidify Alexander's group as the dominant force to follow. Let's adopt a wait-and-see approach and leave that option for contingencies, in case the public's reaction doesn't align with our expectations, Aaron suggested, recognizing the importance of not trying to control every aspect of the situation. I will make the necessary preparations in advance, Nova responded, revealing her intentions to develop alternate plans based on various potential reactions from the public. You do that, and I'll inform Felix about the plan, Aaron said as he logged out, intending to call Felix and discuss the details of their plan, assessing whether Felix would be able to execute it himself or if they needed to assign someone else to carry it out in his stead. Hey, can you handle it, or should I assign someone else to take care of it? Aaron inquired, seeking confirmation from Felix after explaining the task he wanted him to undertake. I'll handle it, no need to worry about me. In fact, it's better if I take care of it, Felix assured Aaron. By being the one to carry out this task, it will appear as if we are making efforts to regain his favor after the mishap of providing free internet data to the citizens for an extended period, which caused him some losses. It will help create a perception of us trying to mend the situation. I'll arrange for someone to accompany you, just as a precautionary measure in case anything unexpected happens, Aaron informed Felix. Sure, Felix replied, and after a brief further conversation, they concluded the call. Immediately after ending the call, Aaron dialed John's number. Yes, sir, John responded promptly upon answering the call. I need you to send someone to accompany Felix tomorrow when he goes to the presidential palace, Aaron stated directly, as he was sure that John would want that too. I will dispatch him right away, sir, John responded promptly. With that, Aaron ended the call and immediately logged back into the Universal simulation. A week later. Turmoil in Eden. Eden, a land once filled with hope and aspirations for change, now finds itself caught in the midst of a shocking upheaval. The visionary leaders who had passionately championed the cause of the people and fought for their rights have been confronted with an unexpected twist of fate. Just a fortnight prior to the eagerly awaited annual celebration, anticipated to be a grand platform for their protest, all but one of these revolutionary figures have been apprehended, leaving the populace stunned. The arrests were executed with remarkable secrecy and precision, catching the revolutionaries off guard and plunging the movement into disarray. The sudden absence of their revered leaders created a void that seemed insurmountable, and the people of Eden were left grappling with the profound implications of this abrupt turn of events. In response to the arrests, a tidal wave of protests erupted, resonating throughout the vast majority of Eden's cities. Squares and streets became the bustling epicenters of these demonstrations, drawing together citizens from all walks of life who were united in their desire to voice their grievances. The sheer number of protesters was a resounding testament to their unwavering resolve. The people of Eden were no longer willing to further tolerate the stifling of their fundamental human rights. As the protests gained momentum, Adolf, the dictator presiding over Eden, found himself confronted with an arduous predicament. In a bid to quell the escalating unrest and reinstate a semblance of order prior to the commencement of the celebratory events, he made the controversial decision to deploy military forces across various locations throughout the nation. This deployment intensified the atmosphere, thickening it with tension and unease as the people and armed forces stood in stark opposition to each other. After reading the news article about the turmoil he had participated in causing, Felix said, "Looks like the beginning of the end has begun," as he realized that the revolution was nearing with each passing second.